Hello everyone, my name is Lattania.
I'm Leomoy, Swaby.
And I'm Chrisania, Dawson.
Today we'll be presenting on employee status, employer duties, and a legal scenario involving a worker named Ronald. So Chrisania, tell me what does this presentation entails?
This presentation will focus on how law distinguishes between employees and independent contractors, the responsibilities employers owe to their workers, and whether Ronald was legally justified in leaving his job.
Thank you, Chrisania. So by the end of this presentation, you should have a clear understanding of how these legal principles apply in real life situations. Before we begin, I'd like you to think about this question. Would you stay in a workplace where your safety is constantly at risk? Imagine going to work every day knowing that your coworkers are playing dangerous jokes on you, and even after reporting it, your employer does nothing to fix the problem. Some people might stay because they need the job, while others might leave immediately. This situation is important because the law actually provides protection for workers in these circumstances, and we will see how that applies to Ronald later in this presentation.
To begin, the law must first determine whether a person is classified as an employee or an independent contractor. So this distinction is very important because employees are generally only legally responsible for the actions and safety of their employees, not independent contractors. So in order to make this distinction, the course used three main tests, which we will now examine.
The first test is known as the control test. This test looks at the level of control the employer has over the worker. If the employer tells the worker exactly how to perform the job, what time to start and finish, and where the work must be done, then the worker is likely to be considered an employee. For example, a cashier in a supermarket must follow strict instructions from a manager, which shows a high level of control. On the other hand, someone like a freelance electrician usually decides how to complete the work on their own, which suggests they are an independent contractor. Now, Chrisania, tell us what the second test is all about.
The second test is the integration test. This test considers whether the worker is fully integrated into the business or simply working alongside it. If the worker is part of the organization, such as a chef in the restaurant or a receptionist in an office, they are more likely to be considered an employee. However, if the worker operates independently and is not part of the core structure of the business, they are more likely to be an independent contractor. So for example, a plumber who is called in occasionally to fix pipes is not part of the business and therefore would not usually be classified as an employee.
So, Chrisania, would a chef be considered a part of the business?
Yes, of course. As I said before, as long as the worker is a part of the organization. Over to you with the rest, Lattania.
The third test is the multiply test, also known as the economic reality test, and it is the most important one used today. This test looks at several factors together rather than focusing on just one. These factors include who provides the tools and equipment, how the worker is paid, and whether the worker takes on financial risk. For instance, if a worker uses their own tools, is paid per job, and can make a profit or loss, they are more likely to be an independent contractor. However, if the employer provides everything and pays a regular wage, this suggests an employee relation. In the case of ready mix concrete versus Ministry of Pension, the court emphasizes that all these factors must be considered together before making a decision. Why it matters, you may ask? This distinction is important for several reasons. First, employer can be held legally responsible for the action of their employees under the principle of vicarious liability. Second, employees are entitled to certain rights and protection, including health and safety measures in the workplace. Independent contractors, however, do not receive the same level of protection, which is why it is important to correctly classify workers.
Now, let us look at employer duties. So, employers have a duty to ensure the health and safety of their employees while at work. So, this includes providing a safe working environment as well as safe equipment, proper training, and competent staff. So, if an employer fails to meet these responsibilities, workers may be exposed to unnecessary risks or harm. So, for example, if machinery is at fault or workers are not properly trained, accidents can easily occur. So, these duties are essential because they help prevent injuries and ensure that employees can work in a safe and secure environment.
These duties were clearly established in the case of Wilson and Clyde Cole versus English. In this case, the court stated that employers must take reasonable care to ensure the safety of their employees. This includes providing safe systems of work and protecting employees from harm caused by others in the workplace.
Now, let us consider Ronald's situation. Ronald worked at Mac's garage for 51 weeks. During that time, his co-workers repeatedly played practical jokes on him, some which were very dangerous. Ronald reported the issue to his employer, but no action was taken for a period of 6 months. As a result of the ongoing situation, Ronald eventually decided to leave his job. This situation can be classified as a constructive dismissal. Constructive dismissal occurs when an employee is forced to resign because the employer has created or allowed intolerable working conditions. In this case, the employer failed to address the dangerous behavior of the other employees, which created an unsafe work environment for Ronald.
The principle is supported by the case of Western Evacuating v. Sharp. The court held that if an employer seriously breaches their duty, the employee is entitled to resign and treat the contract as terminated.
In conclusion, Ronald is not in breach of contract. He was justified in leaving his job because the employer failed to provide a safe working environment. Therefore, the employer is likely to be held legally responsible for the situation.
To end this presentation, I would like to return to our original question. Would you stay in an unsafe workplace? I don't think so. The law makes it clear that employees should not have to tolerate unsafe or unfair conditions, and they are protected if they choose to leave under such circumstances. Thank you. Lattania Lawrence, signing out.
Leomoy Swaby, signing out.
Chrisania, Dawson signing out.